Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Bobbitt. I am the Artistic Director at New Repertory Theater. I use he pronouns, and New Repertory Theater is in the greater Boston area.
Sorry, I was just sharing the screen. I'm Karthik Subramanian, Managing Director at Company On Theater, from the land of, from the home of Manhattan and Mackinac tribes.
Feel free to announce yourself, name, pronouns, and organization and title if you'd like in the chat, and also if you'd like to acknowledge the land of any indigenous people that you may be working or living on. Karthik, you want to introduce this section or you want me to do it?
If you could do it, that'd be great.
Okay.
Space.
So great, friends. So today we're going to just talk a little bit about how we are moving our organizations beyond solidarity statements. I'm sure if you are like me, you have been inundated with solidarity statements, which are all welcome. However, if you are POC, you probably can relate to this, but what POCs want is action. Those solidarity statements don't mean anything if there's no action. And if you aren't aware, if your organization isn't following up with actions beyond these solidarity statements, you will get call outs. You will probably lose a large there will probably be a large mass exodus of people of color from your organizations if you aren't creating actionable steps. So today we're going to look at a couple of sort of Nina Simon with Of, By, For, All has posted a blog post about the 4 different ways you can look at action steps. There's the immediate external, the long-term external, the immediate internal, and the long-term internal action steps. So we'll give you a chance to look at a couple that Karthik and I have come up with. You'll get a chance to analyze those, and then you'll have a working group to really look at creating your own action steps. I want to talk a little bit about a couple of things. One, your action steps need to be measurable. They need to be things that hold you accountable. They cannot be principles or philosophies. They have to be things that you can actually measure and do. Otherwise, they're the same things as solidarity statements. Also, when we do breakout groups, I know we have POCs in the room. We're going to allow the POCs to share what's important to them first about what they want to see in action steps. But most of this work is going to happen by the white allies and colleagues in the rooms to create the action steps. If some of you are maybe uncomfortable or confused about why we are not asking POCs to do this work, and Karthik can talk about that a little bit later. But the real reason is that when you talk about ultimate power in this country, meaning votes and money, POCs do not have that power. The people that made the rules have the power to change the rules. And so it is important that the white folk with your power and your privilege, you use this time to create these actionable steps. After you have these actionable steps, you absolutely want to run it by your POC colleagues to make sure there's nothing in those actionable steps that could be re-injuring. The second thing is that we're in a place of real deep trauma at the moment. Everything that's happened in the last couple of weeks has really triggered hundreds of years of trauma. And so to ask us to help you solve a problem that we didn't create is not fair. It is very similar to going to a person who may have been attacked or sexually abused and asking them what to do. So you want to not do that. The other thing I can say about the people that made the rules, that have the power to change the rules, if you think about women's right to vote, while women made noise and did what they needed to do to get attention, the rules were changed by white men. So that's a good example. If you also look at the photo of the Congressional Caucus for Women's Reproductive Issues, if you've seen that photo, it's all white men. You can imagine what would happen if a female came into that room and the kind of power she would have to actually effectuate change. So the power is where the power is. think that's what I'm saying. So this is a chance for you to embrace your discomfort and try to effectuate change. Karthik, do you want to go over this?
Yeah, I think to Michael's point, I'm just going to show, I think, or show through a couple of slides about some of the work Company One went through, which Company One falls in this weird space of neither being a PWI or TOC, just based on the audiences we serve, our board being a little bit more mixed, our leadership being a little bit more mixed. So the work we did, I think, is probably is within the long-term range that Michael was talking about, but it still creates like some level of framework. And then we're going to actually go to the list of actions NUREP recently put out and kind of look at that and use that as our guiding post for this exercise, and then dive into the work that Michael was talking about. So Michael, unless you have anything else, I'm going to dive in about the work Company One did and then go from there. Great. For those of you who don't know, Company One Theater, like I said, is located in Boston, Mass. Our mission is to build community at the intersection of art and social change, and our vision is a Boston defined by justice, equity, and artistic innovation. I'm not going to read through our manifesto, but it is here. You can also find it on our website. Our manifesto, we created a manifesto rather than an anti-racist statement, because within all the productions we do, within all the programming we do, the anti-racist statements are written in specific to the program itself. The manifesto, it offers a way to kind of do that. The 4 programming buckets that Company One operates in is new work development, productions, education, and connectivity, which could also be community engagement. A lot of the work that you're seeing on the mission and vision in the manifesto slide, like the language here, actually took us about 1.5, about a year and a half to kind of put together. It was a lot of work from as for many people, like work from staff, leadership, board, and partners. While we were going through the work, there was also a lot of our folks who were going through art equity training, the EDI, they were going through the TCG EDI cohort. So it was inherently built on anti-racist values. The way it connects, and I'll show an example in a second, is our manifesto ties to our productions and some of our programming through what we call Amplify Language. Amplify Language looks like this. This is Amplify Language for Kiara's production of Missy Like Hell, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. You'll see each production is, we identify why we're doing a certain production, the communities we're trying to serve, the movements we're trying to connect with, and the people we are trying to uplift through the process. This process is done like 2 months, like it takes about 1 or 2 months to put it together, and it happens typically before any production work starts. And we get signed off, this gets signed off by community partners, by directors, some people in the production team, before it's made publicly available. There'll be a more detailed all-around article coming about this in the coming days, but I just wanted to flag that. The other thing the manifesto does is it informs engagement for us in this moment as of yesterday, based on some of the work we've just done and that like inherently lives in our manifesto. We were able to respond to defunding the police conversation that was happening actually today. The City Hall took some testimonies earlier today morning. Part of it was, I think, because there was that framework from mission, vision, and manifesto, I found, and like I'm a first-time leader, but like I kind of recognized that the work that had been done in that actually helped us kind of inform a reasonably actionable step that we were able to pull together in this moment. And this particular post has gotten a fair amount of traction and response from the community. Yeah. because if someone might be unmuted. That I just wanted to get affected of. And with that, I'm actually going to hand it back to Michael for your up.
Great. So I am sort of fairly new to New Rep. I started the job in August, and I had a few months of onboarding prior to that. And we're in the midst of a major turnaround. The last year was primarily focused on fixing operations, finances, and marketing, and really getting the organization to change the culture, which we have done really well at this year. Excuse me. So the mission is a little bit dated. It's going through a bit of a change right now, but currently you can see it there. We speak powerfully about the vital issues of our times. We're moving our mission to being more of a civic center using theater arts as a way to engage. But we're working on that now. Some of the work we've done to sort of lay the foundation of anti-racism has been primarily through our auditing of our HR processes. We have defined the culture that we wanted, and we went back through our handbook and our benefits to make sure that there was nothing in those documents that that went against the culture that we wanted. Came away with things like unlimited vacation, a liberal teleworking policy. So our transition to this digital work was fairly easy. We're in the process of correcting salaries and benefits. We also believe in growing and changing. So we had a LinkedIn learning account where staff had access to hundreds of thousands of courses to grow their training. In the HR policy, we went back and looked at all of our people posting. So all of our job descriptions lead with an anti-racism statement, and I do use anti-racism as opposed to diversity. Stephanie Ibarra taught me that equity, diversity, and inclusion is a safe, comfortable word, and a word that white people created to make them feel less scared. But we're really talking about anti-racism, anti-oppression, and white supremacy. So our diversity statement is an anti-racism statement. So we lead with that. And that practice comes out of knowing that POCs, if you're a predominantly white organization, POCs are not going to read to the bottom of your job descriptions to find your statement. So lead with it. It really is a way to show that you really mean this. And when I mean lead with it, I mean before mission and vision. Top of the document should be your anti-racism statement. When we get down to qualifications, we are getting rid of anything that is othering, like advanced degrees or numbers of years of service or any kind of software that the job needs to have. We put things that are fitting our culture. So things like must love theater, must be a team player, must be willing to learn. And when we're interviewing people, we're looking for those qualities because most people will still send you their CV. The other thing we do is we invite people to submit whatever they want to submit that shows why they're good for this job. So we're not asking for resume or CV. They can send us whatever they want to send us in any format they want to send us. You can root through all that to find out if people have the skills that you need. So anyway, so some of that work we did. And then we also had full board and staff anti-racism training. It was a 4-hour workshop led by a facilitator. The weeks prior to that, the board and the staff had 2 hours of homework a week to prep for that meeting. And beyond that, they've had an hour of homework a month. And you'll see on my action step that we were bumping that up to weekly work to train them about this anti-racism work. What's next on the slide? Great. So yesterday, so a couple of things. Earlier this week, we sent out our solidarity statement, and there were a number of patrons that sent back negative comments, and a couple of patrons that sent us notes saying that they were no longer going to be members. I wrote them all back and said, thank you for your note. You are no longer welcome at the theater. A real strong stance against racism. So I posted that. That got a bunch of attention, but that was an action step. That's we're trying to come up with affirmative, safe spaces to work in community. And I frankly don't want people in the room that don't believe that Black Lives Matter. So we invited people to leave that did not want to leave. Then the next day, the staff got together and really started thinking about an action plan. And so again, there are 4 different ways you can approach this. You can do immediate, internal, long-term internal, immediate external, and long-term external. This is kind of an amalgam of the few. By the way, also when we posted that we had asked people to no longer return to the theater that were exhibiting racism, without even planning this, we got a number of new subscribers and a lot of donations. So action speaks volumes. So this plan, part of the homework you're going to have to do is to look at this plan, analyze it, think about what's measurable, what's actionable. And there are a few things in this that are not measurable. And part of that comes from the inclusive environment that we operate out of. I don't necessarily believe in department projects anymore. We're doing team-based projects so that members from each department are working on teams. And so the part of this came from a team-based project. So embracing inclusivity meant that we really needed to listen to everyone that had things to say. While I would have wanted this to be all actionable, measurable steps, a lot of the team members felt it was really important for us to state our philosophies. So you'll see some of these are philosophical statements rather than actionable steps. But you can see in here, do you want me, Karthik, to go through each one?
Sure.
Okay, so we are matching the contributions of staff and interns to whatever anti-racism or Black Lives Matter cause they want to do. We don't have a lot of money, but we're putting our money where our mouth is. We will gather and create spaces for our Black artists to heal. So starting next week, we are going to have, we're going to spend money and pay for yoga, group yoga for Black artists, or picnics or barbecues or hikes, or even trauma therapists to come online and have conversations with our Black artists. We're going to continue to deepen our connections with Black artists, patrons, staff, volunteers, advisors. We are going to do more to center Black stories and Black artists in our work. Last year, we created a policy that at least 50% of our artists had to be POC artists. The prior 2 years, we had a total of 16 artists combined. Last year, we had 57 artists. This season, we had 57 POC artists combined. That was a 225% increase. That had a profound effect on our audiences. In fact, our audiences grew by 26% this year. We'll continue on our anti-racism and anti-oppression learning. We're going to move it to weekly learnings. Some of those learnings include brown bag lunches with the staff, so we can talk about the learning that we did. We'll share anti-racism learning and tools with our audiences regularly. So in every single email that we send out, there will be some link to some anti-racism training. We're, like everyone else, we're making sure there are more POC voices and Black voices on our board and staff. We will revise every governance, finance, and operational policy through an anti-racism lens. So we're looking at everything from an anti-racism lens. And then we are doing a vendor audit. So this week we reached out to all of our vendors to make sure they have anti-racism statements, clauses, and actions. And if they don't, we are not going to do business with them. We'll replace them primarily with POC-led vendors or vendors that have strong anti-racism policies. And then we'll continue to perpetuate safe workspaces. Affirmative, I learned from Dane Edidi, we're talking about affirming safe workspaces. So we're affirming the people that are in the room that they are supposed to be in the room. And then those that do not adhere to that, they'll no longer be part of the family. And then we are challenging our colleague organizations to join us in these efforts and more. So I actually sent this to every single arts leader in the Boston scene, not only theaters, but museums and music groups and dance groups. And there's been a profound response. And we posted this on Facebook. And the reason why I did that is because I want the public to hold us accountable. And so we put it out there. Now we have to do these things. So that's one of the reasons why it's important to have action steps that are measurable and things that you can hold yourself accountable to. Did that answer your question, Deborah, about action? Did I pronounce your name right?
You totally pronounced my name right. Thank you so much. Yeah, all of this is really, really good. I just was really interested in that delicate moment of really defining and how, you know, how you made these exits and maybe how that was taken, you know.
You mean from when I responded to the patrons that responded negatively?
Yeah.
I didn't really give them a choice. I just said, I don't engage. I tend not to engage with unhealthy behavior. I tend to say either you're entitled to your opinion, I have mine, and then let it be done. I just told them they're no longer welcome. There was one person that responded, but I didn't respond to her email.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
I mean, the hard thing.
I think in the Bay Area, you know, one of the issues that we have is that everybody thinks that they're, you know, these liberal progressives and that it's less overt than that. So, you know what I mean? Like it's a little bit more embedded and systemic in other ways. So it's kind of interesting that you had this like amazing face-off with the public and you drew the line. Anyway, props. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I will also say that I think one of the true marks of leadership is that leaders have to be willing to be persecuted for their ideas. Every leader, despite their morals, and I think you know who I'm talking about, every leader has a vision and their job is to carry out their vision despite what is right for humankind. So if you think about the greatest leaders in our time, and I mean great not by good people, but like they did a great job of leading lots of people. They were persecuted for their ideas. So here's something that I'm standing behind, and I don't mind being persecuted for it. The other thing I will say is I commiserate with you on liberal sort of good white people, because you know, moving to Boston with your Harvards and your MITs has been very, very interesting to navigate around. Cool.
So we can move to the exercise now. So this is the exercise. Before we send y'all off to your breakout rooms, I will send, there'll be a Google Doc that's sent, so make sure to open that up before you accept your breakout room assignments, because it like lays out what we're doing here. And the exercise is of the new rep, and the document has the new rep statements. Pick any 3 statements from this list of actions that resonated with you, with some amount of group consensus. If you can discuss accountability around it, like how does it get measured, when does it get measured, who holds you accountable, and what are the barriers you're identifying within your organization from like implementing it? And then finally, are there any new actions, like either within this conversation or within the group conversations that y'all came up with that's not on the list? And please identify a report out person. Please practice anti-racist values when trying to figure out who the person is. We will give about, it's 1 o'clock, so we're going to give Michael a second standing, but we'll give about 30 minutes for the room. We'll come back, do a report out, and I imagine that'll be close to the end of session time at that point.
Yeah, and if we can, if it's possible, because we have until 2:30, right?
1:45.
Okay, 1:45. Okay.
Great.
I will try to pop into
2 o'clock. Sorry.
2 o'clock. Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe we can do a little bit more, like 40 minutes. Is that all right?
Yes, we can do 40 minutes because we actually have the time.
Okay. I'll pop into each room to see if anyone needs help. And we'll share, Catherine, I see your note. We'll share that in the Google Doc that Karthik's going to send everyone. A couple of things. The POCs that are in the breakout rooms, we invite you to share why it's important to you that this work is done by white people if you feel comfortable doing that. You're welcome to participate if you feel comfortable. I personally think this work needs to be done by white folk. But if you want to participate, that's up to you. I do think if white folks, if you have POCs in your room and you want to ask them what they think after you have sort of created the probably is comfortable, but POCs, you don't have to respond if you don't want to. Please acknowledge, I mean, you guys have been in TCG rooms. I think the group agreements are pretty much the same. Yes, Jeanette has an idea that each room, if a person can start by asking who identifies as a BI POC. That's really great. And then I'll just sneak into each room to see if anyone needs any help or anything like that. Are there any questions before we go to the breakouts?
Able to open the document too? It's in the chat.
No questions? All right, have fun. This is where I think we as creatives can use the tools that we have at our, the tools that we're really good at, which is our imagination. Imagine the world amazing and not racist. Let that guide your actions. Welcome back. Karthik, do you mind if I just do a bit of a recap before we start sharing out?
Sure.
I just heard a few things in some of the rooms that I want to uplift, and I didn't make it to all the rooms. I'm so sorry, but a couple of things. There was talk about leadership positions with people who are POCs, especially people with titles like Chief Diversity Officer or Community Management Officer. I believe that policy of putting a POC in that position is actually the wrong policy. I think you want to put a fiercely anti-racist white person in that position. If you really want to get change to happen, people that don't have that power, you're just re-injuring them. So think about that. Diversity is good for business. The more you diversify, the more people you're going to have in your company. So those people that are fearing losing money know that you're going to gain more money once you start diversifying. There was a lot of talk about boards, especially when it comes to hiring and hiring new people. One of the tactics you might want to consider, and right now is a good chance to go to your boards for these, with these conversations, because they're probably in the same place you are, is to think about team-based projects as opposed to department-based projects. And that would be also for board work too. If you can get your board to let go of the idea that the board has to make all the decisions, and staff should be involved, volunteers should be involved, and that you can make decisions by teams, then you might get some good work done. And if you can, put a junior member of your team as a leader of that team, then you're building more leadership within the group. There was some talk about how do you build a board that looks more diverse and what measurables might look like. If you don't want to come up with random numbers or dreaming numbers, look at the diversity benchmarks of your community. So if your city has like 30% Asians, then try to have 30% representation on your board. If there's 40% Black people, try to have 40% representation on your board. Share your work, share your action steps. One of the things I know as a gay person is that spaces are safe for gay people because I can tell, because there's a rainbow flag in the window, right? We don't have those benchmarks in the POC BIPOC world. And so the only way BIPOCs know if your space is safe is usually by word of mouth. So one of the ways to get the word of mouth out there is share your work. If you're doing a new initiative that you think is anti-racist, share it with people. And if you're going to do anti-racism training, the thing I would suggest the most is to start with anti-bias training or implicit bias training, because everyone has bias and it's a softer way to get into the anti-racism work. That's all I want to sort of wrap up with before we start talking about hearing report outs.
We heard on the side of giving people more time in breakout rooms in the larger group discussions. We have about 14 minutes and 12 groups of report outs. If I can just ask folks who are reporting out to do it to, like hold it down to about a minute if you synthesize within that. And if you can use the raise hand function on participants to, and I'll call you out. And we're actually going to start off with Sarah, you texted me and let me know that the raise hand function is glitchy. So Sarah, that's all you.
Hi, thank you. I had a great group. We had a great conversation. We talked about the action step of examining governance and finance policies through an anti-racist lens. We agreed that this was very inspiring for all of us, and that is a huge concept. And we ended up having a great conversation about how to achieve this. It's really often necessary to hire an outside consultant, and also, to hire an outside consultant to work with your organization in a sort of global anti-racist, more global anti-racist work. And we talked about how that can be very expensive, and that for organizations with limited resources, that can be very challenging. And then we had a great discussion about potentially creating some alliances with other small organizations in your geographic region, and pooling resources, and seeing to collectively fundraise for that. We talked about this incredible vendor audit, which is new to me and is a very exciting step. And we also talked about how in sort of in various geographic locations that can be increasingly challenging, which led to a really interesting conversation about how one aspect of accountability could be seeing how successful you are or are not, and by virtue of how successful you are or not, perhaps that leads to some specific areas of advocacy, which is another action step and another accountability step. We talked about committing to 50% people of color artists, hiring 50% people of color artists, and that led to a conversation about achieving that in terms of all personnel in the organization, and how individuals at each level of the organization can advocate for these steps, and how that can be challenging when you're in a traditional sort of hierarchy of a theater organization. And one thing that emerged was that these action steps can kind of click into each other. For example, creating a sort of a learning circle, an anti-racist learning circle could involve sharing some resources on anti-racist hiring practices, and creating some exciting energy around that, and saying, oh, what a great idea, that's so cool, like we should all really work on creating these anti-racist job descriptions. What a great idea, executive director, you had. Anyway, I think that's it. I think I'm probably forgetting something, but that's over a minute, so okay, that's it for me.
Thank you, Sarah. Jeanette?
Okay. So we talked about how everything should be SMART, borrowing from strategic planning: smart, measurable, actionable, I always say relevant, and it's not that, and time sensitive. So we talked about changing the fabric of the administration and board to reflect BIPOC. And if you're looking for a SMART goal with that, starting with the percentage of your, we talked about starting with the percentage. I think this is percentage of how they're found in the community, but also, are they in power? Are you listening to them? And are you centering their voices? One of the participants, and I didn't ask if it was okay to share names, so I won't, but talked about how EDI, they have an EDI subcommittee on their board, which is made up of staff, board, and artists. And the EDI committee has the power to override the board. They have more power than the board. And then also something that came up was the weekly anti-racist training for audiences, how important that is, and how that was something that had been neglected at one of the companies that spoke up. Actually, that was me. I can take ownership of that. And then also, I talked a little bit about Alter Theater specific actions that we have taken in this time, as we too are a majority POC led, BIPOC led organization. Our board is 40% Black, but we are not a specifically BIPOC organization. And because of the great privilege of having that level of diversity in our company, we were able to immediately formulate, with a lot of input, action plan that arts organizations can take in our community. And it's under the hashtag Arts for Black Life. to not drown Black activists and what they're doing. And I can drop the link to that in the chat, but yeah. And then also there was a really great prompt at the end of how has this conversation shaped. Am I at a minute yet? Great, that's it then.
Great. One thing I'll add is the Google Doc now has editing privileges. So as you'll come up with resources in your conversation, if you just want to put that on there, and that is a Google Doc everyone now has as a resource document going forward. Thank you, Jeanette. Martin.
Hello. Thank you. My name is Martin Miller, Executive Director of Theater Squared, his. And we had a small group, but we identified a few thI few of the statements and the new reps commitments that really resonated and talked about them. I would say we began first though by just acknowledging how we had the comfort of passivity and the fact that we had really been living there, and that this idea that you know, saying the right things and expressing the right principles, you know, puts you in alliance, whereas in fact passivity is preservation, and preserving a system that is inherently racist is racism. And just talking about how now that we found ourselves in that moment, not wanting to get past it, but wanting to live within it. So anyway, that just kind of set the stage for our conversation. The first statement that was lifted up was a statement about creating a space for Black artists to heal. And one of our group members, you know, asked, you know, what does creating a space for Black artists to heal look like in a predominantly white institution? And, you know, and then another company had issued a statement of a safe haven for artists of color. But what did that functionally mean? We also looked at number 9, this idea of revising every governance, finance, and operational policy through an anti-racism lens. And I shared that our company handbook, when we first instituted it, had come from another theater. And then when we opened up the document, the authorship notes in the document said it was written by yet another theater before them. And just acknowledging that, you know, these documents are systems and they are about preservation, and thus, you know, if you haven't gone through and done the work to make it anti-racist, that they are racist documents. And then talked about number 8, making sure there are more Black and people of color voices on the board and staff. 3 of the 4 people in our room had boards or advisory committees that were all white. And we shared our company's experience of bringing in groups of people to the board at once rather than individuals to a board, in order to change the makeup of the board and not have any newcomer feel as though that they are a marginalized voice. And I think that was the summary of the conversation. We talked about, in short, we talked about wanting to move past having these conversations because we should, and having them instead because we must.
That's it. Thank you, Martin.
We have just with the next session, guys, not till 3, so if people are okay staying, that'd be great, so we can hear everyone.
Natalie, is that okay for you to hold the room too for a few minutes after this?
We'll need the room back eventually, but if we want to run a little over, that's fine.
Thank you. Deborah?
Hey everyone, this is Deborah Eliezer, she, her, hers, Fool's Fury Theater. I'm the co-artistic director. I want to thank my colleagues on our breakout call and their knowledge and lift that up. I will do my best here to summarize what we're doing in a short amount of time. We chose 1, 5, and 10. Number 1, with matching donations, we were talking about how it's easy to measure, but when is the factor? How long are you going to be donating? And being more descriptive, is it in perpetuity? And also the idea of naming the scarcity of that, of a nonprofit supporting another nonprofit, and that the scarcity, and that was me owning that, because I've run a small theater company, is that in itself is a colonial thinking. So just interrogating that. And then also to change the culture of giving. And maybe it's the kind of thing where you reconcile at the end of the year, and you know, in terms of, I mean, I know that the question has to do with staff and interns, but if it's your board and everybody, that you allot a certain amount of money into your budget for giving, your organization to give to the organizations that align with yours. And some other ways of giving came up with the ideas of time, talent, and treasure. So if you don't have the treasure, how about your time and talent? So for example, giving your theater space for protesters, emergency supplies provided by theaters for protesters, the board contributing time to certain organizations, which can have some sustainable long-term values to it, which might be even more important than giving money. And we're talking about measuring by, how would we measure this? We would measure it by the sustainability, maybe the types of, let's see. Also some, I'm skipping around, my apologies. Some boards are actually declaring the time that they work in your nonprofit on their 990s. So how about designating that time? If it's an hour a week, 15 minutes of that is working towards these anti-racist, supporting these other anti-racist organizations. And then also our ability to connect artists to other designers and using other resources that we have as being connectors. We talked about hiring of 50% POC artists, and also that 50% as a percentage is also problematic. It's a type of hierarchy. It sort of implies that 50% is enough, and sort of interrogating that, and also needing to interrogate our hiring and casting practices, which are related to that, and making sure that they're in alignment with your values. Some other ways this is problematic is that it can often induce token representation without power. And how can we give artists more of a voice is something we were talking about. If we're just talking about bodies, what is the voice that they have and the agency that they have within your organization? Some other ways that tokenization was named was non-paid interns being posted on the website for your diversity, and also the gala and how galas can be so diverse, but they don't really represent the actual organization. Changing, in terms of changing leadership models, First Stage in Virginia, my colleague Emily was, they are working on breaking down the hierarchy of staff, and also paying artists, for example, for being Instagram takeovers, which is actually like promoting their own show, is being a marketer for your show, so pay them and paying your labor. At Fool's Fury, my company, we've been changing power at the highest level, because we recognize that representation without power is just tokenism. So we are trying to get better submissions for our festival, which is a national festival, the Fury Factory, by creating a guest festival position, which is on par with the other 2 co-directors of our company. And that is a BIPOC, queer, marginalized voice, person of color that will be rotating every 2 years in that position. And that we've been working on that. I'm talking a lot. We got to number 10, vendors, basically interrogating and having a relationship with customer relations, sweatshops, checking back with them over time, and choosing different vendors if you need to. And that's my check. Thanks.
Thank you, Deborah. I will say this reminder that Google Doc, feel free to update notes and action items on there and take that with you if you're bouncing off, because there'll be something else on there. With that, Sarah Hughes.
Hi. I had an amazing group. Sorry, I'm just pulling out my notes here because I was frantically taking notes on that last group. We had a great group. We talked about the 3 things we identified as feeling really meaningful to us. The 50% hiring BIPOC on board and staff and artists as well. Something important that came up there was not identifying those people, but allowing them to identify themselves, not making assumptions about someone's identity. And then we talked a little bit about how that functions with organizations that rent, and how a rental house or an organization that gets, supports some of its work through rentals could become more welcoming and open and accessible to BIPOC specifically. One idea that came up was neighborhood discounts, that a lot of organizations are in neighborhoods that have traditionally been BIPOC or have been gentrified, and sort of figuring out those dynamics, reaching out to your neighbors, offering discounts to folks who live nearby, and thinking about pricing and outreach in different ways for organizations who rent and don't necessarily control the artists who are coming into their building in the same way as a producing organization. The vendor audit really spoke to us, and Michael popped in and really helpfully brought up what he mentioned, which is letting people know publicly who your vendors are. Once you've done that audit, then letting people know these are the people we're working with. These are organizations that are really worth supporting. They're doing this anti-racist work. So again, to sort of let people know that you're committed to making a safe space. Without having a rainbow flag available as a tool. And then gathering and creating spaces for our Black artists. We talked a little bit about how that functions in the pandemic, and the simple idea of sharing a Zoom account. If you have an organizational Zoom account, there are a lot of artists out there who are not going to be able to pay that monthly fee. And that's like a really small thing you can do right away in this weird time. One member of the group talked about surveys that their organization was doing already during COVID to figure out how to better serve their audience, and how those could be restructured they weren't initially going to be gathering demographic info. Why not? And could that be a helpful tool for figuring out how to better serve their audiences? What other questions could be on those surveys? And then, this has been mentioned, but opening up theater spaces to protesters and providing places to charge phones, water, PPE. And then a really fantastic idea that came up about accountability was putting out facts, the facts of how you've held yourself accountable once a year, just as you do with an audit. And then that could be a practice that an organization could engage in addition to internal reporting. And then one other thing was just reminding everyone that using the word minority can be really hurtful and is also completely inaccurate. So thank you so much to my awesome group.
Thank you, Sarah. I believe we had Layla.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say that it was, our Middle Eastern North African Theater Alliance is brand new, hasn't even done our press release. And so we kind of did our statement as a national network. Deborah is on our steering committee as well. Sorry, I can't see if there's anyone else on here from us, but, and so just thinking about what does it mean for a group that is specifically about the representation of non-Black POC, not all non-Black, but that we are representing a group and we have Black folks within our community. And I found myself just recognizing accountability wise, myself sort of saying in my head the same thing I hear as a playwright, and which is, well, I don't know the, I don't know the Black folks in the Middle Eastern North African theater community in the same way. And so just thinking about how to use that model when you don't have a building or an institution or funding, of looking at as you said, Michael, looking at your community and saying, okay, what is the makeup of our Middle Eastern North African theater community? How can we make sure that at least that percentage of folks on our steering committee, which is the equivalent of our board right now, are Black Middle Eastern North African folks, and what does that mean specifically? And of course, like an initial step is that gathering space for those folks. And then also we're sharing anti-racism tools and learnings from our working group on that already, so.
Thank you. Michael, any closing thoughts as we're 8 minutes over?
Yeah, I hope this has given you guys confidence in your ability to collectively make up action steps. I do, again, encourage you guys to consider your immediate and long-term external and your immediate and long-term internal. And really, really, really start with education. This anti-racism work is major surgery, and it requires a delicate hand and knowledge. So have fun, go, and let's change the world. We can do it. We can do it.
Thank you, Michael. Natalie, thank you so much for holding the space open to let us naturally wrap. Thank you, everyone else, for participating.